Your mother signed this to guarantee I stayed provided for and protected. I've already put the house up for sale. You have exactly 1 hour to pack everything you call trash and leave before I replace every single lock. Brittany is moving into your room starting tonight. That is exactly what my stepfather coldly declared to me just moments after we buried Mother. He did not even bother pretending he grieved. He simply tossed paperwork onto the desk before my stunned and silent face. Without hesitation, I lowered my eyes toward the document. A quitclaim deed stared back at me. It was dated 3 days before Mom slipped into her final coma. The signature beneath it was trembling and uneven, a jagged, crooked scribble, nothing like her handwriting. It was clearly forged, a rushed, pathetic attempt at stealing everything. Then I glanced outside through the living room window and noticed a black SUV parked with 2 broad men watching the property silently. Suddenly, everything connected. Stephen was not greedy. He was absolutely terrified. Loan sharks had arrived to demand repayment. Selling my mother's house was his desperate solution. I did not scream. I refused to beg him for mercy. I quietly lifted my bag from the floor and stared into his cold eyes. Enjoy the house, Stephen, I whispered evenly. While you still can. I bet you never saw a man sell his own soul cheaply only to discover he signed the receipt in vanishing ink. If you have endured family choosing money over your existence, tell me in comments when you realized they discarded you 2 hours later. I sat alone on a thin mattress placed upon the floor of a cramped studio apartment, reeking of stale coffee and quiet desperation. It was a brutal fall from velvet chairs and polished mahogany inside the Rosewood estate, but at least the air here felt honest and clean. It carried no scent of betrayal or lies. I scanned the room. At the few boxes I managed to rescue my clothes, my laptop, and several small keepsakes I saved before Stephen changed every single lock for the past 6 months. My world had blurred into hospital monitors, beeping, and whispered conversations with tired oncologists. I slept in a plastic chair beside my mother's bed. So often my spine felt permanently bent. I was the one measuring morphine carefully. I handled the estate bills and accounts, balancing finances. Stephen was secretly draining whenever I questioned a $5,000 withdrawal labeled business. He would sneer and claim I misunderstood high-level finance, but I understood perfectly. I knew. While I wiped my dying mother's forehead gently, he was gambling away her lifetime savings at some casino. Then he brought Brittany into our home. He introduced her as a private nurse for palliative support, but I noticed everything. She lingered longer in the master bedroom than near the sickbed. She examined antique vases and polished silver like an auctioneer assessing future profits. She was not hired to monitor vitals. She was auditioning to become grieving widow. Before the role opened, the fury burning inside me that night was not only about eviction papers. It was about the performance earlier that same morning. You should have seen Stephen grieving. He stood beside the open grave, shaking dramatically and sobbing loudly into a handkerchief while neighbors offered their condolences. They whispered about his devotion and heartbreak. It deserved an Oscar, but once guests turned toward the reception tent, his expression hardened instantly. He seized my arm tight enough to bruise and leaned close. Stop looking so bitter. You are embarrassing me before investors, he hissed sharply. He was networking at his wife's funeral. Yet that still was not my true breaking point. 10 minutes later, I glanced across the cemetery grounds and saw Brittany standing beneath a black umbrella, pretending solemn grief. She wore simple black, but around her neck hung a double strand of vintage South Sea pearls with diamond clasp. My breath stalled painfully. Those were my mother's wedding pearls. She had worn them on her special day and clutched them weekly just last week, whispering she wanted me to inherit them after she passed. Stephen had not only stolen property, he raided the jewelry before her body even turned cold and draped treasures onto his mistress. That was when I understood clearly this was not mere greed. It was erasure. He intended to wipe Mother and me from existence so he could start anew with younger girlfriend and $5 million resting comfortably in his bank. He believed he won. He assumed stripping my home and inheritance would shatter me, but sitting there in darkness Watching rain trail down my window, I finally stopped crying. I wiped my cheeks and focused on my laptop, resting on stacked books. Stephen believed himself master of the house because he held keys, yet he forgot. I installed the entire smart system. I dried the final tear away and opened my laptop blue light. From the screen pierced the studio darkness. I lacked a plan but possessed intuition. Stephen was arrogant and dangerously careless. He assumed replacing locks kept me powerless. I navigated calmly to the security login page for Rosewood Estates, Maine. System, I entered the admin password used for 5 years. Access denied. I tried once more. Access denied again. He had altered it naturally. He had. He was not brilliant with technology, but paranoid enough to secure digital doors for 1 second panic. Ignited inside, if locked out, I could prove nothing. Then I remembered the hidden blind spots. Stephen never discovered the secondary backup system. 6 months earlier, when I first suspected his private nurse was neglecting my mother, installed a separate, hidden network of discrete nanny cameras. They were high definition with clear audio enabled and concealed carefully inside library bookshelves and within master bedroom walls and fixtures. They operated through an independent private server. Stephen never knew even existed. I entered the password. Eleanor, 1960, my mother's name and birth year. The monitor blinked green. Access granted. My pulse pounded hard against my ribs as I searched through the cloud archive. I did not need to scroll far. I selected the file time-stamped yesterday, 11:43 p.m. Precisely the night before the funeral service. The library camera feed filled my screen, sharp and crystal clear. There stood Stephen, pouring himself a glass of mother's aged vintage scotch, the bottle reserved for my wedding day. Brittany stood nearby, twirling in the leather executive chair, laughing like a teenager raiding a liquor cabinet. I slipped on my headphones slowly and raised the volume. "Are you sure this will actually work?" Stephen Brittany asked, lifting the document from the polished desk. This signature looks so shaky and scribbled. Stephen swallowed his drink in one harsh gulp. "It doesn't need perfection, babe. Just durability." For 48 hours he leaned forward, face pale and damp beneath library, lighting the syndicate called. Again, they gave me until Friday night. If I failed to produce cash, they will not just break legs, they will bury me. So we sell quickly. Stephen whispered desperately. We locate a cash buyer, avoiding questions. We dump the property for whatever price, clear the debt, and vanish to the Cayman Islands before anyone notices the corrupted title. I pressed pause. My fingers trembled, not from sorrow, but pure adrenaline. There it was, the undeniable proof. He was not a grieving widower making poor decisions. He was a debtor confessing forgery and criminal conspiracy. He planned selling a $5 million estate he never owned to settle illegal gambling obligations. I leaned back against my apartment wall, cold and unforgiving. I possessed evidence. I could approach the police immediately, file for injunction, halt everything. But I considered the legal system and Stephen's charm when strategically applied. He would argue the footage lacked context. He would hire attorneys to claim the signature. Shook from weakness in mother's final days, it would become a drawn-out civil war in court, bleeding the estate dry while he occupied my home freely. No civil suit would satisfy me. I did not want reimbursement. I wanted destruction, permanent and complete. I needed him to commit more than mere discussion. I required action, a serious federal crime. He desired a silent cash buyer. Fine, I would provide exactly that. Next morning, I entered the offices of Walters and Associates, flash drive secured. Plan fully formed. Mr. Walters served my mother for 20 loyal years. He embodied tradition, mahogany desk, polished 3-piece suit, immaculate, and reverence for signatures. When he viewed Stephen confessing forgery, his face reddened deeply. "This is outrageous," he muttered, fiercely removing his glasses, cleaning them aggressively. "This is repugnant. We contact police immediately. Audrey, seek emergency injunction. Stop sale tonight. Have him removed before sunset." "No," I replied. "An injunction restrains, it does not punish. He will claim duress, *, deny knowledge of fraudulent deed. He will maneuver through legal loopholes and linger 10 years inside mother's house while probate drains assets. I leaned forward firmly. I do not want prevention. I want completion, mister. Walters paused mid-polishing motion. He studied me carefully. A slow, sharp smile formed gradually. He opened a drawer, retrieving a thick cream-colored file. Ironically, he began tapping the folder. Your mother anticipated his financial incompetence, yet refused homelessness. This contains her authentic final will. He slid it across the desk. I examined the highlighted clause. Life estate provision. Walters clarified gently. He possessed legal right to reside rent-free at Rosewood Estate until his death, a permanent roof guaranteed to him, but one condition he indicated. Bold text. Clause 4 stated. Any attempt by life tenant to sell, mortgage, or transfer title constitutes repudiation, voiding life estate, instantly reverting possession. Fully to remainder man. The remainder man is you. Walters concluded calmly. Had he remained still, he kept shelter. By attempting sale, he commits fraud and legally evicts himself. It was flawless, the final nail in Greed's coffin. Let's assist excavation. I responded coldly. We spent the following hour constructing the stage. A legitimate buyer was unacceptable. No innocent family would suffer collateral. We formed shell entity, Mr. Walters managed for wealthy client privacy, vague corporate identity. Triton Holdings LLC. We drafted message, carefully avoided full 5 million XSEs, alarms. Desperate men spook easily. Subject cash offer. Rosewood property offer 4.8 million all cash. 48-hour close condition. Buyer requires immediate completion for 1031 exchange. Deadline compliance. The 1031 exchange sold authenticity, a recognized tax deferral mechanism requiring strict reinvestment time constraints. It justified urgency and immediate liquidity. Corporate, not magical. We sent email to Stephen's address listed on for sale owner's site he hastily created. Then we waited. 11 minutes passed. My phone, still linked to smart system, pinged library audio. I inserted earbuds. Brittany, look at this. Stephen exclaimed, voice trembling. 4.8 million cash, closing 2 days. Do it, Brittany squealed. Accept immediately. No, Stephen answered, tone arrogantly calculating. They rush, which means desperation. I can demand more. We monitored thread on Walter's screen. Stephen responded, not acceptance, but counteroffer, $5.2 million. Walters glanced sideways. He's negotiating. The man is committing a felony and still negotiating price. Let him. When I said calmly, offer him 5 million even, and clean, make him believe he controls everything inside that room. We drafted response, final offer, 5 million. Take it or walk away. 3 minutes later, a reply arrived. Agreed. Send contract. I glanced at Mr. Walters silently. The trap was beyond prepared. Stephen had stepped directly into it and bolted door behind himself. Schedule closing Friday. I instructed quietly. I want front row view. Friday morning. Arrived under bruised plum sky. The closing remained set for 10 a.m. at offices of Sterling & Company, a boutique firm Mr. Walters preferred for delicate corporate transactions of scale. The space whispered well, thick, silent carpet, air scented faintly of inherited money. I was not inside the room, not yet. I waited instead, inside black sedan parked across street, watching live footage from button camera pinned discreetly to buyer attorney lapel. At 9:55, a taxi stopped. Stephen stepped out wearing tailored suit. I recognized the Armani immediately. He purchased it for mother's 50th birthday celebration 5 years prior. It strained tightly around his waist, swollen by whiskey and mounting stress. Still he fastened buttons confidently, like executive finalizing merger. Brittany followed behind, appearing less nurse, more vacation, tourist, scrolling casually through her phone. I zoomed closer on camera feed. She browsed over water villas in Bora Bora. They entered conference room as though owners of entire building. Mr. Henderson stood buyer. Attorney associate of Walters named David. Thank you, accommodating our strict timeline. My client eager to finalize exchange, happy to assist. Stephen replied loudly, confidence falsely amplified. He sat down, tapping fingers rhythmically against glass. Tabletop sweat glistened across his forehead, visible despite grain of camera feed. He eyed water bottle, yet never touched it. Adrenaline radiated through his posture. Wire transfer prepared, David announced, sliding thick documents across reflective. Table 5 million pending verified title transfer. Do you possess the deed? This was moment absolute reckoning. Stephen reached inside his briefcase slowly. His hand quivered, faintly masked by adjusting tie. He withdrew deed-bearing mother's forged, unsteady signature and placed it down confidently like winning hand. He assured room title remained clean, claiming late wife transferred ownership before her passing. When questioned about daughter Audrey, he fabricated cruelty, calling her unstable addict who relinquished rights for quick cash listening as he shattered her name to secure deception. Audrey remained patient. Buyer attorney presented bill of sale. Stephen signed swiftly without pause, accepted 5 million wire confirmation, and smiled broadly, certain of triumph. That was moment. Doors opened wide. Audrey entered calmly with her attorney and 2 men, clearly not negotiators. Stephen laughed mockingly, assuming deal completed. Audrey corrected him with steady voice. She revealed, authentic will. Stephen possessed only a life estate permission to reside, not authority sell. By attempting sale, he nullified right instantly and permanently. 5 minutes earlier, he owned shelter. Second he signed, he evicted himself legally and publicly. Worse still, the wired funds now constituted evidence. A detective stepped forward, naming offense plainly. Federal wire fraud transfer frozen immediately. Stephen unraveled, panic overtaking arrogance. His mistress attempted fleeing until detective disclosed audio recordings recovered and stolen. State jewelry proving her complicity as cuffs tightened around Stephen's wrists. He pleaded, desperately calling himself father. Audrey ended illusion with single truth. He never raised her, only tolerated presence, and now as legal landlord she was removing him. Stephen was escorted away. The estate restored, locks replaced entirely. Later, alone within silent house, Audrey held her mother's pearls and breathed deeply. Sometimes revenge is not destruction. It is allowing someone sign away their own future while you quietly keep keys.